Hey there, YouTube. My name is Ash, and I'm here to help you crush your coding interview. I've been a professional software engineer for 16 years. I've interviewed with most of the big tech companies, and I worked at Amazon on the Alexa team for a little while, so I've definitely learned a lot about coding interviews along the way. Most of it painfully through trial and error, lots of failures before I ever saw any successes. So today I'd like to talk to you about how and exactly what I study when I'm getting ready for tech interviews, just simply because I've done it so many times now that I've got a pretty good technique down. So the first thing is to remember that you only have a limited amount of time to study. And so you definitely want to maximize that. And one of the best ways you can do that is by limiting what you're studying to what's most likely to appear on these interviews. For that, the very first resource that I would point you to is this excellent book called Cracking the Coding Interview. You can get it off of Amazon for less than $40, and trust me, it pays for itself. I've included a link to this book down below. This is hands down the #1 resource that you can have for coding interviews. If I could have only one resource, okay, apart from like paper and pencil, this would be it. Okay, so please, please, please go either purchase this book or borrow it from a friend who already has it. Chances are at least half of your friends who are engineers own this book somewhere. Who knows where it's sitting in their apartment or house, but trust me on this one book. So the next book I'm going to recommend is a supplementary text. Please don't feel like this is in any way required. In fact, if you don't have a computer science degree, I would almost recommend that you not even look at this book, just simply because of how complicated and daunting it can feel. This would be the Corman, Lieserson, Rivas, Stein algorithms book right here. It says Introduction to Algorithms. That would be the sense of humor of these MIT professors who are way, way, way smarter than I could ever, hope to be. All right, the next resource that you're going to want to use is some kind of a web application that allows you to enter in the solutions to coding problems, which it then checks for you using a bunch of tests to ensure that you've actually hit all the edge cases and that you're not fooling yourself into thinking that your solution is complete when it really isn't. I've used LeetCode in the past. I've had friends that have told me that InterviewBit or HackerRank or some of those other sites out there are better in their opinion. Your mileage is going to vary. Go with whichever one you feel helps you the most or you just like the most. There's really no right or wrong answer there. It's just simply a tool, kind of like a calculator. So beyond all of that, now I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people don't really consider, and I didn't consider until it stung me during my interviews. Namely, you're going to want to make sure that you study the language that you're going to use. I strongly recommend that you use a scripting language like Python or JavaScript, because you're going to write a lot less code during your interview using one of those languages than you would using a language like Java or C# or C++. Now, there are times when it might be the right choice to interview in one of those other more verbose languages just simply because the team you're interviewing with prefers it. However, it's been my experience that I do much better when I interview in either Python or some other scripting language that allows me to be much more concise with my code when I'm in a timed environment. Whichever language you go with, though, you need to make sure that you study the language a little bit. You need to understand all of the different major data structures within that language that you're going to need to use. For instance, if you're dealing with JavaScript arrays, there is not an append method. Okay, there's a push method that does the append function, but it's called push. Now, if you don't know that during the interview, you're going to be docked points for it, sometimes quite severely. So make sure that you understand the language and make sure that you understand the major data structures within it, such as arrays or lists or dictionaries or sets, okay? And definitely whatever version of hash table or hash map is in there, because I guarantee you, you are going to need to know how to use hash tables and hash maps during your coding interview. It just, without fail, you will need to use a hash table at some point. And if you don't, that's almost a red flag. Okay, so now that we've covered what you're going to study, let's talk about how I recommend you study it. My #1 tip is to use paper and pencil for coding problems. I know that might sound a little bit archaic, but it's been my personal experience that when I work through coding problems on paper and pencil, I end up absorbing the material much better. And when I'm done with the problem, I go quickly type it into LeetCode or whatever other system I'm using, and I have it double check my work. I've tried prepping without paper and pencil and using nothing but keyboard, and I've tried using paper and pencil and using LeetCode to double check, and the latter works at least 10 times better. So I strongly recommend it. Okay, the next tip I'm going to give you just seems downright magical because of how much it increases my productivity, and that's the Pomodoro Method. Before, I used to just kind of say, okay, I'm going to study, I have this big chunk of time, and there'd be all these distractions between social media, text messages, sudden things I would think of to go look up on Wikipedia. And then I discovered the Pomodoro Method, which basically says for 25 minutes, just focus on your work. Don't go answer the phone. Don't go, look for a snack in the kitchen. Nothing, just 25 minutes. Now, at the end of that 25 minutes, you get a 5-minute break where you can go do whatever you want. Then you repeat that for 4 cycles, and after 2 hours of that, you now get a 20-minute break. That may sound just almost silly, but I did this last time when I was studying for tech interviews, and I found I was able to put in those 25-minute chunks and have them add up to 2 or 3 hours of focused studying in a given day. And I only had to do that for a few weeks in order to get to the level of preparation that left me feeling comfortable. So if you haven't tried it before, please give it a shot, and I think you'll really be surprised by the results. So that brings me to my next topic, which is how many days a week should you be studying? Some people are tempted to say, well, let me try to study 6 or 7 days a week because, hey, this is a short period of time, and once this is over, if I do well in the interview, then I can relax. Honestly, I think it's counterproductive. Instead, I would recommend you study 4 to 5 days a week using the techniques I just recommended, and that way you'll be refreshed on the day of your interview. You don't want to burn out during interview prep so that by the time you show up at your interview, you're just a ball of stress, okay? All right, now that we've covered what you should study and how you should study it, I'm going to dive into some additional things that you can do to further enhance your preparation. But before I do that, if you're getting value out of this video, could you please go ahead and hit that like button for me? Thanks. Speaking of the interview itself, it's going to be pretty intense. You have to keep in mind that you're going to be there all day and you're going to have anywhere between 4 to 7 different interviews, each of which are going to last about an hour at most companies. So you definitely have to prepare for this the same way that you would prepare for anything else that's that intense, whether it's a marathon or a tennis tournament or anything else that requires you to bring your A game for that many hours in a row. So that means that I would strongly recommend you try to eat healthily, you try to take some walks. You don't need to be out there running a 5K every day, but definitely get a little bit of physical activity. You have to keep in mind that this is a competition, okay? So anything you can do to give yourself an edge when it comes to performing is going to help, all right? Now, I'm not trying to be judgmental, and I'm not trying to say anything about whether or not you should drink or do anything else. If you're an adult, that's up to you. I'm just simply telling you, you're competing with people who are going to be doing everything they can, including eating healthily and avoiding large amounts of partying in order to perform during that interview. You may be able to beat them in spite of that. I simply would prefer to try to maximize my chances. All right, my final piece of advice is largely for folks who are not already working as software engineers. Namely, you need to be working on some side projects. If you're already a software engineer, then you're very lucky in that your day job allows you to actually be gaining experience that when you're asked questions about how you would do things in a real world scenario, you're able to draw from your day-to-day work in order to answer those questions. If you don't have a job as a software engineer already, you're going to need to supplement that with side projects so that when somebody says, hey, if you were building something like this, then what are some of the precautions you would take? Or tell me about some interesting thing you did involving blank, right? Like these are the types of questions that you get asked in order to see what you've actually done. Software engineering companies typically want to hire folks that are already building software and not just people who have studied everything there is to know about building software. And so try to get that real world experience however you can. This could mean anything from just doing side projects, using courses that you find on Udemy, which are a great place to go find instructors who will walk you through a side project step by step so that you can learn along the way. Okay, I know that was a lot of information to throw at you, and hopefully it was more helpful than it was overwhelming. If there was anything I said that was at all confusing, please leave a comment below with your question and I will try to get to it as soon as possible. All right, have a great day and I wish you the best of luck on your coding interviews. Okay, oh my gosh. Oh wow, for a second there I thought I forgot to turn on the microphone again. Okay. Oh, okay.